Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another powerful episode of Kingdom Birth Conversations with Tamara. I'm your host, Tamara Wren. No time like the right time. Let's jump into today's message. The topic for today is all things breastfeeding, navigating unseen challenges and celebrating diversity. In case you didn't know, August is National Breastfeeding Month. The theme for this month is This is Our Why. On August 6, 2011, the United States Breastfeeding Committee officially declared August as National Breastfeeding Month. Their proclamation reads, in recognition of National Breastfeeding Month, each August, the USBC hosts a social media advocacy and outreach campaign inviting member organizations, breastfeeding coalitions, partner organizations, and individuals to participate in online action and conversation about the policy and practice changes needed to build a landscape of support for babies and families. That's a mouthful. In addition to it being National Breastfeeding Month, there are a number of national weekly observances that are also taking place. These observances uplift the different cultural aspects of breastfeeding. The first week of August, which is August 1st through 7th, is actually World Breastfeeding Week. Now, World Breastfeeding Week was born out of the 1990 Innocente, I'm trying to pronounce it right, 1990 Innocente Declaration on the Protection, Promotion, and Support of Breastfeeding. Now, this declaration was produced and adopted by participants at the WHO/UNICEF policymakers meeting titled Breastfeeding in the 1990s, a global initiative. And it was co-sponsored by the USAID and the Swedish International Development Authority. And as a result of this proclamation, this is where the United States in 2011 adopted National Breastfeeding Week or proclaimed it National Breastfeeding Month. This is where the United States came up with National Breastfeeding Month. So August 1st through 7th is World Breastfeeding Week, which is celebrated by the World Alliance for Breastfeeding Action. And that it's a global campaign to raise awareness and galvanize action on themes related to breastfeeding. And this year's theme is enabling breastfeeding, making a difference for working parents. Then we have August 8th through 14th, which is Indigenous Milk Medicine Week. This year's theme is From the Stars to a Sustainable Future. August 16th through 24th is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Breastfeeding Week. This year's theme, Telling Our Stories, Elevating Our Voices. And August 25th through 31st is Black Breastfeeding Week. The theme, We Outside, Celebrating Connection in Our Communities. And for the first time this year, from September 5th through 11th, we will be celebrating Lactancia Latina. Now, someone may ask the question, why do we need to have so many cultures and ethnic groups and folks celebrating all these different weeks? Isn't National Breastfeeding Month enough? And here's the thing. To the best of my recollection, Black Breastfeeding Week was the first time a different group, a different culture, a different group of people started recognizing breastfeeding awareness specifically for that group or culture. But what we have to recognize, and this is all opinion, this is my perspective of it, is that breastfeeding is global. And there's something about living in Western culture in the United States where we personalize breastfeeding so much that it has become so commercial and so filled with people's opinions and differences that you're not able to celebrate the truth of what breastfeeding looks like in particular communities and for particular people. And in the United States, oftentimes breastfeeding is an anomaly. It's something that's outside of the norm that needs to be fixed and needs to be adjusted based on our parenting choices or personal preferences. We don't tend to look at breastfeeding and breast milk as the first form of nourishment, right? We look at it as the alternative. We look at it as the second choice, but not the best choice. And when you look at it from a global perspective, our beliefs here in the United States are actually the anomaly, the strange ones. And there are many times that people come to the United States from different cultures and they adopt our way of doing things instead of continuing to do what they may have done in their countries and their cultures. They feel like here only poor people breastfeed, or breastfeeding is not the first choice. It's buying the fancy bottles and doing all the things. So when we understand that breastfeeding protection, promotion, and support is part of a global movement, then that sheds light on the importance of it as going beyond a lifestyle choice. And the big picture then becomes about improving infant and young child feeding globally, and not just something that we may or may not choose to do in this country. Breastfeeding is cultural. And in America, breastfeeding is divided into class and socioeconomic boxes. So, for example, there are large corporations that celebrate and champion breastfeeding. However, if you are in the C suite, manager high up, or you're working at a corporate level of these institutions, then having a breastfeeding room, having extra breaks to express your milk and pump your milk and do whatever you need to do, those things are available. But when you go down the food chain in those companies, a lot of times the people who might work for those companies but work at a more community level, they don't have the same access. So it's really important for us to remember that when we have these different groups, different ethnic groups, different cultural groups celebrating breastfeeding, it also gives them an opportunity, gives us an opportunity to get rid of the myth that certain folks don't breastfeed. Like, they love to say that Black women don't breastfeed, but we do. Could our numbers be higher? Absolutely. But we need to change that narrative that says we don't, and champion the ones that do, and then work on building from there. We need to be able to support breastfeeding that goes beyond these mixed messages that we send out into society, where only certain people truly have the access to do what needs to be done. Now I'd like to turn our attention to 3 reasons that I believe prevent the breastfeeding rates from being higher. To the best of my knowledge, these are not part of the everyday conversation about breastfeeding. These beliefs are based on my personal experiences working with women and families in perinatal health, and my professional training as a breastfeeding educator. So, the first place I'd like to start is the idea of fear. And there are 2 spaces that women come into breastfeeding where there can be fear. The first one is it's going to hurt. And this is usually based on, well, so and so who breastfed or tried to breastfeed told me that it hurts. So they are now afraid that breastfeeding is going to hurt. They believe that the baby's going to suck on their nipples and it's going to be painful, or that the baby's going to bite them when their teeth come in. There's also the fear from the perspective of, what if I don't get it right? And then the question becomes, well, what does it mean to not get it right? So let me just go back for a moment. There is this myth that we live by as a society called no pain, no gain, that comes out of the exercise movement. And there's this belief that if you're exercising, if you're doing the work and you're not in pain, then you're not pushing yourself hard enough, you're not doing it right. And somehow that belief has spilled over into other things that we do. That if we're not grinding, if we're not hustling, if we're not sacrificing, if we're not getting enough, if we're not up all hours of the night, if we're not losing something, then we're not going to benefit from that thing that we're working towards. And it's the same thing with breastfeeding, that many women think that if it in order for it to work and be successful, there needs to be pain. And that's a myth. That's not true. Then the idea of what if I don't get it right? And my question is, well, what does it mean to not get it right? And for some women, that means, well, what if my baby refuses my milk and my baby doesn't want my milk? What if I can't make enough? What if I can't figure it out? And those are fears about what if I can't do this. And we're so driven by so many choices that we make by fear. But I'm going to give you two solutions. I'm going to give you a traditional solution and a faith in action solution. So the traditional solution says that during the prenatal period, that you need to seek education from a professional, maybe a peer educator, a lactation educator, or a board certified lactation consultant. You can do some self-guided education if you're going to the right sources. I don't encourage you to just Google your way through breastfeeding, but if you have the right resources, you can do some self-guided learning. Then I also suggest that you join a breastfeeding support group. And as you're gathering this information, you're going to learn how to separate fact from fiction. You're going to learn to address your impressions of breastfeeding. And by that, I mean you're going to be able to identify, what does breastfeeding look like in your mind? How do you understand the purpose and the process of breastfeeding? And as you begin to understand these things and navigate them, you will be able to see how your fears are unfounded, or you will be able to get the knowledge and the support that you need so that you can transcend those fears. When I look at it from the faith and action perspective, I'm going to tell you that you need to start releasing your fear. Releasing fear needs to be a non-negotiable. In other words, do not subscribe to the belief of be afraid and do it anyway, because that is not biblical. Releasing fear is a non-negotiable. Philippians 4:5 reads, do not be anxious or worried about anything, but in everything, every circumstance and situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, continue to make your specific requests known to God. So that includes the breastfeeding space. If you're anxious, if you're worried, if you're fearful, you start by releasing that fear. Releasing fear is non-negotiable. Release your fear, and that will free you up so that as you're seeking traditional support, you're able to receive it, understand it, and apply it. You're able to take those thoughts, marry it with the evidence, get some education, and apply it, right? So you need to start with your faith in action, because again, that frees you up to apply the traditional information and education that you get, and then it becomes more efficient and more effective in helping you to be successful with your breastfeeding process. The second reason that I believe that the breastfeeding rates are not as high as they could be is the impression that women have about their body type. So let me explain this to you. There are some women that believe that their body type will not facilitate successful breastfeeding. And I'm specifically talking about breast size. If a woman has smaller than average breasts, whatever that means, or larger than average breasts, she may believe that she will not be able to breastfeed successfully because her breasts won't function correctly. Maybe she doesn't understand the process of milk making. Maybe her breasts are really, really small and she's concerned that she won't make enough milk. Or maybe her breasts are larger than average and she has some discomfort with them. She has some challenges in day-to-day living, her lifestyle, maybe the way she sleeps, the bras that are comfortable being able to exercise. And now the idea of breastfeeding is just one more thing that she has to think about and figure out how to manage them with what she's already working with. And that's a real thing. That's real for many women. And then there are women who may have pre-existing negative body, pre-existing, how would I say it? Like they have pre-existing thoughts around having a negative body image. They don't believe that their body is good. They don't believe that their body works. They're already struggling with that. It could be as deep as body dysmorphia, or it may not be that deep, but it could still be that when she looks at her body, for whatever reason, she doesn't see it as something that can work for her or to do the things that she needs it to do. Maybe she's struggled with different things physically throughout her life or encountered different situations, and she just doesn't believe that her body is capable of doing what it needs to do to successfully breastfeed. So again, as far as the solution, I would go to the traditional. During the prenatal period, seek support from a board certified lactation consultant. And I would start there, because if breast size is a thing, like if that's real, that's tangible, that's a fact, her breasts are smaller or larger than supposed average, then she's going to need that clinical level of support from a breastfeeding consultant to give her the right education and the right information. And I want to just stress that I keep saying during the prenatal period, because if you're waiting until you've had that baby, that's too late. Imagine if you were going to someone's house for dinner and you got there and they hadn't shopped for the groceries, they hadn't prepared a menu, and they say, well, we were waiting to talk to you to find out about what you like to eat and, what kind of diet you have and if you have any food allergies. And now you're here and none of the preparation work has been done, but you're hungry. So it's the same thing like a baby. If you're waiting until the baby comes to figure out breastfeeding, then you've already set yourself up for having a very challenging relationship with breastfeeding. Okay, so that's why I keep saying in the prenatal period. So again, you want to seek support from a board certified lactation consultant, because we are now talking about the clinical aspects of breastfeeding, and a peer educator may not be enough to support that. And if you're struggling with issues around your body image, then I also suggest you speak to a licensed mental health provider. And then together, these two can provide the support that you need, because the thoughts that you have about your body are not going to suddenly disappear because you've given birth. As a matter of fact, they may even intensify. And when we look at this from the faith perspective, faith in action says, embrace your identity and the belief that when God created you, he said, it is good. Psalm 139:14 reads, I will give thanks and praise to you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, and my soul knows it very well. Now, in this verse, wonderfully means in a way or to an extent that excites wonder, astonishment, or amazement. So you are created to excite wonder, astonishment, or amazement from the Creator's perspective. And here the word fearfully is used to intensify the word wonderfully. So it's not from a negative perspective, but there's this intensity about the wonderment of who you are. And another translation that might be a little bit easier to comprehend, it says, thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. So you are complex. There is nothing average about you. The uniqueness of who you are and your body presents itself in a myriad of ways. You can be grateful for your unique body and learn to work with it. Just like with fear, embracing faith in action is the first step to efficiently and effectively implementing traditional solutions. That brings us to the third reason why I believe that breastfeeding rates are not as high as they could be. And this is that there are women who have had experiences with inappropriate contact or behavior, and that may include sexual abuse, assault, or molestation, or situations where their bodies have been sexualized verbally by others, as well as the images that we see in the media. And the solution to this is that during the prenatal period, that women should seek support from a board certified lactation consultant who has training and experience working with survivors of sexual abuse or assault. They exist, they are out there. Also, to seek help from a licensed mental health provider. And if possible, get them to collaborate on your care. Because a woman may have experienced sexual abuse or assault doesn't necessarily mean that she won't breastfeed, but she is going to have to find her unique path to breastfeeding, one that helps her to feel safe and not um, more vulnerable or exploited by the situation and the call to breastfeed. And it's important to seek help so that you can navigate and overcome the physical and emotional history that is carried in your body so that you can learn to manage the memories and create a vision for breastfeeding that is not hindered by those memories. And when we look at this from a faith and action perspective, Isaiah 43:2-3a says, when you go through deep waters, I will be with you. When you go through rivers of difficulty, you will not drown. When you walk through the fire of oppression, you will not be burned up. The flames will not consume you, for I am the Lord your God. So, right there, God is telling you that He will walk through every and any situation with you. He recognizes that there are things that have happened in your life that have been difficult, that have been hard, that have just not made you feel safe, that something was taken from you. But He will not leave you alone in this situation, that He is available for you. So while you're seeking support from a board certified lactation consultant, trained and experienced in working with survivors, and you are seeking help from a licensed mental health provider during your prenatal period, you can also lean into God, right? Because when you believe this verse and you lean into God, not only will He help bring the right people to you, but He will help them craft the right plan that you need to be successful in your breastfeeding. That was a lot of information. I hope that it was extremely helpful for you. In summary, I believe that we need to have deeper conversations about breastfeeding. We need to go beyond the evidence behind why breastfeeding is important, and we need to start talking about why more women are not choosing to breastfeed, or why they're stopping early and not continuing to breastfeed, or even why they are not exclusively breastfeeding. And to do that, I believe that we need to start letting women have the space to dig deeper into their thoughts, their feelings, and their belief system around breastfeeding. We need to understand the drivers and the impressions that they have about the process, and we need to understand the memories that they hold in their bodies and how those memories impact their choices. How can you support a woman in your life who is having a baby or thinking about breastfeeding? Here are some tips for you. Start by asking questions that are non-judgmental. For example, what is your dream for breastfeeding? How can I support your dream coming true? You want to make sure that you educate yourself with the facts about breastfeeding so that you are not fostering belief in myths or offering suggestions that are counterproductive to her reaching her breastfeeding dreams. And if you don't know what to say, don't say anything. Now remember, for our faith in action, these messages are not to be one and done. They're not for you to just rip and run through and go on to the next one, but take some time. I want you to really reflect on the message. I want you to review the scripture, pray for guidance, and listen. Does this information apply to your situation? And if so, how can you apply it? And then I want you to share what you've learned. It's just that simple. You can show your support by subscribing, hitting the notification bell so that you never miss our soul nourishing discussions. And also, I just want to add another thing. If you would like to talk to me, if you want to go deeper, instead of just leaving a comment, go right ahead and send me a DM in my Instagram or my Facebook page. The information is there in the notes, in the show notes there. So I want you to leave me a message if you want to go deeper. I am here to support all women, but I have a special heart for women who are 35 to 44, especially if this is your first time having a baby. So, by all means, feel free to reach out to me and let's just talk. So, again, I don't want you to miss out on anything. We're having these soul nourishing discussions, and I want you to be a part of it. Until next time, stay blessed and keep the faith. See you soon.